what if you could stop one of the worst crimes on the internet before it even happened? I'm not talking about some complex new law or huge police raids. I'm talking about something way, way simpler. A single automated warning message. I know, it sounds almost too good to be true, right? But some brand new research suggests it might actually be possible.
Okay, so here's how we're going to break this down. We'll kick things off with this surprisingly simple deterrent. Then we'll get into the clever experiment that proved it works, the huge challenge of taking it from the lab to the real world, and this controversial idea of hacking for good. After that, we'll hit the major roadblocks, both technical and legal, and finally talk about what this all means for the path forward. So let's start with the big one, the really startling finding that's at the heart of all this, a discovery that could totally change how we think about preventing harm online. Just look at that number, 53%. That's a potential 53% drop in people trying to access what's known as child exploitation material, or CM. And what caused that massive drop? A simple warning message that popped up right before they clicked. I mean, that is a huge potential impact from such a tiny intervention. A result like that really forces you to stop and ask a pretty fundamental question. Can we actually shift our focus from just punishing a crime after the fact to actually preventing it, to stopping the harm before it ever has a chance to occur? But, to really get why that 53% figure is such a game changer, we first need to zoom out and just understand the sheer scale of the problem we're talking about. The thing is, the distribution of CM is a massive, growing global crisis. It's spread in every form you can imagine: text, images, videos, even live streams. And the offenders, well, they're using more and more sophisticated tools like encryption to hide what they're doing. The volume of this stuff is it's overwhelming. Law enforcement is often just completely swamped, without the resources to go after the worst offenders at the scale that's needed. So where in the world did that incredible 53% figure come from? Well, it wasn't just a guess. It came from a really clever experiment designed to prove, scientifically, that this kind of deterrence can actually work. They used a tool from the world of cybersecurity called a honeypot. The best way to think of it is like a trap. It's a totally controlled, fake environment that's designed to attract potential offenders so researchers can study their behavior without putting anyone at all at risk. It's the perfect setup for scientifically testing prevention strategies like this one. And the experiment itself was beautiful in its simplicity. First step, attract. They drew in users who were specifically searching for content that was right on the edge of legality. Step 2, intervene. Just as the user was about to get to the material, boom, they hit them with a warning message. And step 3, measure. They just watched what happened next, and what they found was that a huge number of users just turned away. Now this is where it gets really fascinating. They tested different kinds of messages, and it turns out the most effective ones weren't the ones that made some kind of moral appeal. Nope. The ones that worked best were the ones that triggered a simple fear of getting caught. That threat of being detected, that was the real deterrent. But okay, here's the catch. And it is a big one. The experiment proved the idea works, but you can't just set up little individual traps all over the internet. The real challenge is figuring out how to take this from a controlled lab environment into the wild, chaotic real world. I mean, let's put it side by side, because the difference is huge. A honeypot gives you that scientific proof in a super controlled environment with a small number of users. A real-world deployment has to work at internet scale, reaching people in all sorts of natural scenarios, in the middle of a totally chaotic environment. It's a whole different ballgame. So, to make this work at that kind of scale, you'd need some way to automatically stick these warnings in front of a user at the exact moment they try to access this harmful stuff. And to do that, well, that means we have to dive deep into the technical guts of how the internet itself actually works. And this right here, this shows the golden opportunity. See, when you go to a website, your request doesn't just go straight from your computer to the server. No way. It bounces through a whole bunch of intermediaries. Think your internet service provider, for one. And every single one of those points is a potential place to inject a warning message. To get how that's possible, it helps to think of the internet in layers. You've got the physical connection at the very bottom, like your Wi-Fi, and all the way up at the top is the application you're actually using, like your web browser. An intervention could happen at almost any of these layers to change the data before it ever gets to you. So what we're really talking about here is basically doing what's known in cybersecurity as a man-in-the-middle attack.
And I know that sounds pretty bad, right? But instead of using it for something malicious, like stealing your passwords, the idea is to use it for good, to intercept a request for illicit material and inject a warning to stop a crime.
But as powerful as this whole idea is, it slams right into two giant hurdles before it could ever be a reality. First, the technology people use to hide, and second, the rule of law.
Okay, the first roadblock is a technical one. The people doing this are savvy. They have powerful tools to hide what they're doing. Encryption basically scrambles the data so no one can read it. VPNs can route their traffic through other countries to get around monitoring. And then there are networks like Tor, which are built from the ground up for anonymity, making it incredibly hard to insert a message.
And that brings us to the even bigger question. Let's just say you could magically overcome all those technical challenges. Is this kind of mass intervention, is it even legal? Well, what's really interesting is that some countries might, and I stress might, already have laws that could be interpreted to allow it. Take Australia, for example. There's a law there, the TOLA Act, that lets the government issue what are called technical assistance notices, which could potentially force an internet service provider to help insert these kinds of messages. But that just blows the doors wide open on a huge can of legal and ethical worms. I mean, does this count as interception of private communication, which would usually need a warrant? And if it does, you can't get a warrant for every single instance. It just doesn't scale. It raises these huge, profound questions about privacy, surveillance, and government power. So all of this, it leaves us standing at a really difficult crossroads, where this incredibly powerful tool for protecting victims smacks right up against our fundamental digital rights. And this right here is the central dilemma. On one hand, you have this urgent, undeniable need to protect the most vulnerable people imaginable. But on the other hand, you have these incredibly important concerns about mass surveillance, government overreach, and what this means for the future of a free and open internet. Ultimately, this technology forces all of us to confront a question that has no easy answer. It's not just a question for lawmakers or for tech companies, it's for everyone. To stop a truly terrible crime, what trade-offs are we as a society willing to make?